Hello and welcome to the LittleHorse Python Quickstart tutorial, in which we're going to announce LittleHorse 0.7.2, and from scratch we're going to install LittleHorse on your machine and get you running with LittleHorse in Python in under 10 minutes. Generally should take about 8 minutes or so. So without further ado, let's first start by creating a Conda environment and installing the LittleHorse client. Now bear with me, I am a Java guy, not a Python guy, so I'm probably not going to do this in the right way, but I'm going to create a Python environment called LH Quickstart with Python 3.11. That sounds correct. Once that goes, we're going to install the LittleHorse Python client in to this Python environment. Okay, so now that is finished, next thing to do is to install the LittleHorse command line, which if you have brew on your machine is just this command. Alternatively, you can install it from source using Go. So we'll install the LittleHorse CLI. And next thing we're going to do is install a minimal LittleHorse server. So the LittleHorse server in production requires a Kafka cluster as its commit log on the back end, and also requires, if you want authentication, you probably want to run some OAuth server or OIDC provider such as Keycloak or perhaps Okta if you prefer cloud services. Let's see if LHCTL has been installed. Great, we have just installed the LittleHorse command line. Now we're going to run the LittleHorse standalone Docker image. So this LittleHorse standalone image right here is a Docker image that we provided, that we released, that runs the LittleHorse server, LittleHorse dashboard, and a Kafka cluster all in the same image, which is great for local development because in one container you have basically a fully featured LittleHorse cluster that you can use for development. So if we run Docker PS, we see that the server has been up for about 21 seconds or so. And if we run LHCTL version, we see that the client and the server are both on version 0.7.2, which is correct. At this point, you have supposedly, hopefully gotten everything working and ready to continue with the Python Quickstart. So the biggest thing that we released in LittleHorse 0.7.2 is the administrative dashboard, which is in early access. I'll show you what it is today. It's very, very useful for figuring out what's going on with your workflow. But without further ado, we have now verified that the LittleHorse server is working. Well, let's check Python again. I'm not a Python guy, so this is liable to break. And it works. That's somewhat surprising. Okay, so next thing, I should note that I'm not in charge of any of our Python development. There's a fantastic engineer who does all of this. The fact that I don't know Python doesn't mean that we have bad quality in Python. The fact that I don't work on Python means that it's very, very good. Okay, so to register a workflow in LittleHorse, well, in LittleHorse, before you can run a workflow, you first need to register it. So in our workflow, right, in our Quickstart, we have defined a very simple workflow that is basically the minimum, the hello world example of LittleHorse. So this is the same example I've done in Java and Go. The first thing that this workflow thread does is define an input variable called input name, and we put an index on it to make it searchable. The next thing that we do is we execute the greet task, and we pass that name into the greet task. So what I'm going to do right now is run this file, which basically just creates a LittleHorse config, creates a workflow, and then creates the task and creates the workflow. So very, very simple, but we'll do it right now. Python, I know, ls Python Quickstart, cd Quickstart, Python register workflow.py. Python, well, let me check the documentation. We'll see. Python and quickstart.register workflow. There we go. Sorry. If I just read the documentation that my team wrote, it would have been a lot better. Okay, so now you've seen that we've created a task def, and we've also created a workflow specification. So the task definition is just it's a task definition with the name greet and a single input parameter, which is a string with the name of name. And that makes sense if you look at the worker file, which defines the task method, or well, task, I don't know if it's Python, I don't know if Python has methods or functions, but the task function or method called greeting, which has a name, which is a string, and then context, which is a LittleHorse worker context. Anyways, so we have also created the workflow specification. Now, if you go to localhost 8080 with this Docker image running, you'll see the LittleHorse dashboard. And you notice here we have a task definition and a workflow spec. So if we click on the workflow spec and then go over there, we see a very simple workflow specification, which has an input variable defined like we did on the first line of a workflow. And then here we have a single action which happens, which is a task node, which executes the greet task def. Now, if we click on the greet task def, it takes us over here, which is the definition for the task def landing page. And we can see here the input variable for that task definition. And if you scroll down here, we see there's no running workflows for this workflow. So the next thing to do is we should run an instance of a workflow. So to do that, we're going to run the Quickstart workflow with the input name set to Obi-Wan. Now we see the workflow is running. Let's go to the dashboard and see what happens. Well, I don't want this, I want this. So this is the workflow specification page again. We scroll down to the bottom, we see that we have a running workflow run. Now, if I click on the workflow run, we see that the workflow run is on the greet task right now. The greet task is in the task scheduled status. Why is it in the task scheduled status and not completed? Well, that's because in LittleHorse, to execute a task, the way LittleHorse does it is put the task on an internal task queue in LittleHorse server and wait for a task worker to pull for the task queue and ask for the task to be executed and then executed. So right now, we don't have any task workers actually running. And because we don't have any task workers running, the task is going to stay in the task queue until we start one. So the next thing that remains for us to do is to start a task worker. To start the task worker, we're going to copy this command from the documentation because I don't know Python, and we're going to run the worker. And we can see here that it has executed a task apparently. So if we return here, we can see that the workflow is now completed, and there was an output here called hello Obi-Wan. And if we go to the task def detail page, we come down here, we see that the task is in the task success status now. So I hope this was valuable for you. You can see how quick and easy it is to get started with LittleHorse in a very short amount of time. And this is the LittleHorse Python client. I put links in the video description to the LittleHorse Slack community, our documentation, some further examples, and we'd love to hear from you as you get started with LittleHorse. Any bug reports would be fantastic. Very excited to see what you guys build with this new system. A lot of new things coming up soon. LittleHorse 0.7.2 is ready for production. The only thing keeping us from 1.0 is just an abundance of caution as we're about to commit to semantic versioning and all of the compatibility requirements that come with that. So thank you for tuning in. I hope this was fun, and we'll catch you next time.